Chinedu Okonkwo was a man of simple means, living in a modest apartment complex in Lagos, Nigeria. He was known for his friendly demeanor and his eagerness to help his neighbors. As the unofficial caretaker of the complex, Chinedu often found himself mediating disputes and ensuring that everyone lived harmoniously. However, his life took a tragic turn due to a series of unfortunate events that ultimately led to a 20-year prison term. It all started on a humid evening in August. Chinedu had just returned from his job at a local electronics shop when he heard raised voices coming from the apartment next door. He recognized the voices as those of Mrs. Onoyo and Mr. Obiora, two tenants who had a history of clashing over trivial matters. This time, the argument was over shared utilities. Mrs. Onoyo accused Mr. Obiora of using more than his fair share of water and electricity, while Mr. Obiora countered by saying Mrs. Onoyo's constant laundry sessions were the real culprit. Chinedu, ever the peacemaker, decided to step in. He knocked on Mrs. Onoyo's door, hoping to calm the situation. "Mama Onoyo, please, let's settle this amicably. We're all neighbors here," he said, trying to soothe the tension. However, the situation was more volatile than Chinedu anticipated. Mrs. Onoyo was not in the mood for diplomacy. "Chinedu, you always take his side. You think because you're the caretaker, you can tell us what to do," she spat, her eyes blazing with anger. Mr. Obiora, standing in his doorway, added fuel to the fire. "She's just mad because she can't afford to pay her share, always looking for someone to blame." Chinedu knew this was getting out of hand. He tried to speak again, but his words were drowned out by the shouting match. Other tenants began to gather, adding to the chaos. Feeling the pressure, Chinedu decided to call the landlord, Mr. Adeyemi, to report the situation. The landlord's intervention brought a temporary calm, but the underlying animosities remained. Chinedu hoped things would quiet down, but just 2 weeks later, the situation erupted again, this time with tragic consequences. It was late at night when Chinedu heard the familiar sound of arguing. Exhausted from a long day work, he was reluctant to get involved. But as the shouting escalated, he knew he had no choice. He got dressed and headed out to see what was happening. As he approached Mr. Obiora's apartment, he saw a crowd gathered. Mrs. Onoyo was screaming at the top of her lungs, accusing Mr. Obiora of stealing her laundry from the communal drying line. Mr. Obiora, incensed, was shouting back, holding a large kitchen knife in his hand. Chinedu's heart raced. He had never seen Mr. Obiora so agitated. "Everyone, please, go back to your homes. Let's handle this peacefully," he pleaded, stepping between the two combatants. In the confusion, a scuffle broke out. Mrs. Onoyo lunged at Mr. Obiora, trying to grab the knife. Chinedu, in an attempt to separate them, got caught in the middle. In the ensuing chaos, the knife slashed through the air and struck Chinedu's arm. Blood poured from the wound, and Chinedu fell to the ground, clutching his arm in agony. Panicking, Mr. Obiora fled the scene, dropping the knife. The other tenants, shocked and scared, quickly called the police and an ambulance. Chinedu was rushed to the hospital, but the wound, though serious, was not life-threatening. The police investigation was swift. Witnesses provided conflicting accounts, but the knife in Mr. Obiora's possession and Chinedu's injury were damning evidence. Mr. Obiora was arrested and charged with assault with a deadly weapon. However, the story took an unexpected twist. During the trial, Mrs. Onoyo testified that Chinedu had, in fact, grabbed the knife from Mr. Obiora and inadvertently injured himself while trying to mediate. She claimed that Chinedu had always been biased against her and had escalated the situation. Chinedu, still recovering from his injury, was bewildered by the accusation. He had always tried to keep peace, never taking sides. But Mrs. Onoyo's testimony, coupled with other tenants who corroborated her story out of fear or spite, painted a different picture. The court, swayed by the testimonies and the chaotic nature of the incident, found Chinedu guilty of reckless endangerment and aggravated assault. Despite his attempts to explain his intentions, the judge deemed his actions irresponsible and dangerous. Chinedu was sentenced to 20 years in prison, a harsh penalty for a man who had only tried to help. Prison life was a harsh adjustment for Chinedu. He spent his days reflecting on the events that led to his incarceration, replaying the night of the incident over and over in his mind. He maintained his innocence, writing letters to appeal his sentence, but the legal system moved slowly, and his pleas went unanswered. Chinedu found solace in his faith and the friendships he formed with fellow inmates. He became involved in prison programs, teaching literacy and electronics repair to other prisoners. Despite the grim circumstances, Chinedu remained hopeful that one day, justice would prevail. Chinedu's story is a stark reminder of how quickly a situation can spiral out of control and how perceptions can be manipulated in the heat of conflict. His life, once filled with promise and community, was irreversibly altered by a tragic misunderstanding and the complexities of human nature. In the end, Chinedu's hope lay in the possibility of redemption and the belief that truth would eventually come to light. His story serves as a cautionary tale about the importance of clear communication, fair mediation, and the impact of our actions on the lives of others.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to Akinpelu Bolaji Charles channel. Today, we are diving into a compelling story from Lagos, Nigeria, about a man named Chinedu Okonkwo. Chinedu, known for his kind heart and dedication to his community, found himself entangled in a series of unfortunate events that led to a 20-year prison sentence. We will explore the story, the lesson we can learn, and how legal and professional property management solutions could prevent such tragedies. Let's get started. Chinedu Okonkwo was a humble man living in a modest apartment complex in Lagos. He was the unofficial caretaker, often mediating disputes among neighbors. One evening, he intervened in a heated argument between two tenants, Mrs. Anayo and Mr. Obiora, over shared utilities. Despite its efforts to mediate, the argument escalated. Tension boiled over when Mrs. Anayo accused Mr. Obiora of stealing her laundry, leading to a confrontation where Mr. Obiora brandished a knife. In the ensuing chaos, Chinedu was injured while trying to separate them. Unfortunately, due to conflicting testimonies and a twisted narrative, Chinedu was wrongfully convicted of reckless endangerment and aggravated assault. Lesson learned. 1. Effective communication. This incident highlights the critical need for clear and effective communication. Misunderstandings can quickly escalate into serious conflict if not addressed properly. 2. Neutral mediation. Acting as a mediator, especially in heated situations, requires neutrality. Any perceived bias can worsen the conflict, as seen in Chinedu's case, where he was accused of siding one party. 3. Documentation. Keeping records of disputes and intervention can provide clarity and protection for those involved. Chinedu's lack of documented effort may have contributed to his wrongful conviction. Legal and professional solution. 1. Formal mediation services. Property management company can provide formal mediation services with trained professionals who can impartially resolve conflicts. This reduces the risk of bias and ensure fair handling of disputes. 2. Legal awareness. Tenants and caretakers should be aware of their legal rights and responsibility. Regular workshops or informational sections can empower residents to handle disputes legally and constructively. 3. Property manager involvement. Property managers should be actively involved in addressing disputes before they escalate. Prompt and professional intervention can prevent minor issues from becoming major conflicts. 4. Emergency protocols. Establishing clear protocols from emergencies, including whom to contact and immediate steps to take, can mitigate dangerous situations. In Chinedu's case, earlier involvement of authorities might have prevented the escalation. In conclusion, Chinedu's story is a tragic example of how quickly things can go wrong when disputes are not handled properly. By implementing effective communication strategies, neutral mediation, and legal awareness, we can create a safer and more harmonious living environment. Let us remember Chinedu's experience and strive to prevent such incidents in our communities. If you have found this story insightful, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to my channel for more content on property, facility, and real estate management tips. Thank you for watching and see you next time.